BDPN 2024 is here, and I am blessed as usual with my guests. So, the one and only Edosa Odaro is in my presence today for this day in the life interview. For you individuals that aren't familiar with Edosa is a global cross-industry A&I data transformation leader, guru. Many sort of innovative solutions that he's provided and guided companies and organizations, resulting in their growth, further success with data, and very strategic in implementing transformation strategies, and for banks, Lloyds, Barclays, also the government, HMRC, Sky, then from a financial point of view, AXA, AIG on the insurance side. So Edosa, welcome. Thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, and it's great to be here, and thanks for bringing me on. It's really a privilege to be here and to make a contribution as much as we can. You know, I think you're doing a really enviable, great job with what you're doing, and good on you. So I'll be pleased to contribute in any way I possibly can.
Yeah, definitely. No, well, look, we're just getting started. BDPN, we're like 6, 7, 8 months in, and so we've got a long way to go. But thank you for those kind words. So let's we want to add some value to our members. All about adding value to the BDPN members, and so let's dive into it from your point of view. So you studied in Nigeria. So did you grow up in Nigeria?
Yes. So I did grow up in Nigeria and had my first bits of my education, should I say, in Nigeria. So I lived in Benin City and the sort of Midwest of the country, if you like, so south towards the Atlantic.
Okay.
and then lived in Lagos and lived in various parts of the country as well. And yes, I had my first degree out there in the Obafemi Awolowo University
Obafemi Awolowo.
Got you. In a historic city called Ile-Ife. So it's an incredible place to been. So yeah, so that was where I grew up actually.
Fantastic. So when you were growing up, so were you like one of many kids? Were you the brightest kid? Were you always good at maths? Give us a bit of a feel about that.
Listen, I huge family. I've got 7 siblings.
Okay.
So it's a big family, and I'm not in any way significant in within that, because I'm, especially from a Nigerian standpoint, I'm not the first, nor am I the first male. Not the last either. You know, so I'm sort of smack in
the middle,
in insignificance, if you like, from that viewpoint. So yeah, but I think to be entirely honest, yes, I was pretty good at maths as a child, as you know, pretty good at logic, loved sort of doing Lego and things like that. I was fortunate also to get access to certain sorts of things that you wouldn't normally, you know, you couldn't take for granted in that part of the world.
But middle class family, middle class family.
Yes, middle class family, and so, you know, not really lacking per se, if you know, not necessarily lavish and luxurious, or you know, upbringing, but not lacking certainly. So very fortunate, and I have to be kind of honest about that.
Yeah,
and
definitely.
You know, had you know, access to things that perhaps the average child may not have had access to. You know, I'll do, you know, lots of puzzles and Lego and things, but I was also predisposed to that sort of thing. So I liked it. I would spend time just sort of doing things like that.
Okay, gotcha. Fantastic. So you obviously excelled at school, and college, university, and then when was your like? How did you fall into data? So what was your sort of like first experience thinking, do you know what, this kind of makes sense to me? I like this. It's just something that I can, you know, that I can develop in, and I can think I can add value to. I'm good at this.
Look, I'll tell you something. You know, I have to be honest. You know, that I'm not good at everything. You know, and even school-wise, I wasn't good at everything. So I very early on knew that I was kind of inclined towards mathematics, for instance, rather than things like, for instance, chemistry. You know, so one of my kind of big failures, if you like, was that I went in wanting to initially at university study biochemistry and found it to be, oh my God, organic chemistry. Oh no. Right. And sort of had a change in my second year. So fortunate that the first year there was a lot of commonality in the sort of compulsory modules, if you like, that we had to do in the first year. So I was able to switch in second year to computer science and economics. So that I knew I was going to get out. I was good in mathematics, so I was able to go in a direction that I thought
Yeah,
might were my strengths, you know. And
gotcha.
the other thing I'd tell you, you asked about when did I know, you know, listen, I was very fortunate as well to not have a what you would call a direct role model per se, but I did have a role model in that there was kind of a family friend of ours who was a head of computer science at a university in Nigeria. And
Right.
much as I didn't see him very often, I just sort of kind of liked what he did and liked the sound of the things he kind of talked about.
So
And
so
I'd,
what age were you then? I'm trying to picture it and kind of visualize to people. So you're like 13, 14, thinking, I like this guy. So he was obviously successful. So he someone that you looked up to and thought, wow, okay. Was it around that sort of age, 13, 14, that
yeah,
sort of
yeah,
thing?
yeah, yeah, spot on actually. Yeah, they were sort of mid-secondary, so yeah, about 13, thereabouts, where things are starting to make sense to me, you know, and starting
Yeah.
to sort of formulate things in my head. But also, don't forget, I said to you that I was very inclined towards certain things anyway, right? So it was all kind of coming together. I was inclined towards mathematics. I was inclined towards logic, building stuff, and I was also kind of like, you know, the in that household of a billion children, I was kind of like the one that my dad would go with and say, "Look, can you find this? Can you solve this?" You know. So I also liked kind of solving problems and actually seeing things through.
So
You know.
so the seven children, were you in the middle typically?
Well, I was second to be
You're
fair.
second.
So
Okay, cool.
yeah, so I wasn't
Okay,
quite in the
middle-ish.
middle. Yeah. Well, I was yeah. So not quite the first, but I was quite
Yeah,
senior,
yeah,
like, you
yeah.
know, one of the older ones, if you
In the
like.
middle.
But there was times when I was literally like in the middle because you know it took time to build out the seven the
Yeah, yeah,
battalion.
yeah, exactly.
I can
Yeah, yeah,
say
yeah,
that.
definitely. Put out the seven. Yeah, definitely
Yeah,
that growth of the
yeah.
family. Fantastic. Superb,
Mhm.
superb. So you always had it in you, somebody who kind of looks up to you that you looked up to. So that individual was a bit of a mentor. So did he recognize your gift,
No.
talent, or interest?
No, he didn't. In fact, you know, at the time, I wouldn't have thought of him as a mentor. I didn't know what a mentor even was at that point. I mean, when I look back, I realized these things. You know, to be fair, you know, he didn't notice anything necessarily in me. You know, it was kind of me in him. And so it's almost like having a mentor on TV. You know, just I mean, of course, I knew him physically, but the reason I'm stressing this is that I didn't necessarily, and I think a lot of people might be in this kind of place as well, is that, you know, of course, there's the kind of mentor that's very hands-on. You know them, they know they're your mentor. I mentor people right now as an example, and you have an agenda, you have a whole thing, and you have a
Mhm.
plan. This wasn't anything like that. This is kind of almost at that kind of role model, you know, at a
Right,
distance, you know, and that kind of is almost something that I would say was aspirational, and it just motivated me, I suppose,
right.
towards that, and gave kind of form to something that perhaps was already inside me to a certain degree. In that, you know, it was almost like you've got some tools and whatever. How do you direct it? How, you know, how do you make use of it and formulate it into something that's actually tangible?
Gotcha, gotcha. Okay, superb. So when was your first role then? What was your kind of like after university, your first role in data? What was that? What was that like, and what were you doing?
Mm. Yeah, so it's a good question. Well, there was something even before I finished out university, which was actually working for the national petroleum kind of company in Nigeria, which is called NNPCs. You know, Nigeria is a huge petroleum, you know,
Mm.
exporter, and it was doing some sort of seismic data analysis, which is obviously looking at data from, you know, all of the sensors and things that go under the ground to actually assess whether there is sufficient oil reserves and whatever else before you invest the billions that you have to
Yeah, yeah, to get it out.
to go drilling. So that was kind of my first kind of commercial look at data. But beyond that, then there's plenty, obviously more ever since
Yeah,
since
yeah,
that sort
definitely. I
of
bet it's obviously
first experience.
yeah, absolutely. In terms of how you manage that, how you did that, in terms of what tools you used, I suppose it was kind of quite basic because compared to like
Yeah,
today,
yeah.
what you've got. So I mean, were you programming then? Did you kind of learn anything then? What did you use to do that?
Yeah, so in those days, it was a combination of just doing some basic statistical analysis type stuff, using things like SPSS and the likes. This I'm talking quite a long time ago,
Yeah, yeah,
and,
exactly. That's what I mean. Interesting.
and just grabbing some data and just cleaning it up. So it wasn't
Yeah,
anything too sophisticated at the
exactly.
time, to be fair. And I was only like a junior kind of intern, with a lot of other people who had sophisticated sort of knowledge, and there was lots of specialized software, given the industry
Sure.
that things had to go into, and ultimately what they did with all this data was to literally create things that would look like, I suppose in today's world, it'd be like a kind of geological kind of mapping of the Earth as to what that looks like. So
Right.
that's what that's trying to do. Because ultimately, what they want to do is know volume, quality
Gotcha.
of what it is reserve, and is it a viable thing? So actually, and that
Interesting.
in some ways, is very well connected to how I think about data in today's world. But I'm sure we'll probably get a chance to chat about that. But it's very much very very value driven.
Yeah,
In the way that was looking at things. It wasn't looking at data for the sake of it. It was really looking at data from a commercial. Is it
that's
worth
good. That's good though. Yeah, I mean, so,
drilling?
it's impactful, isn't it? It's impactful. So it's not just, what you were looking at was impacting investment. So it was good, like commercially viable, data that you were manipulating and finding out
Yeah.
about, which is great. Okay, cool. So kind of moving on. So I mean, obviously, clearly, a lot of success over those years from Nigeria. Then you kind of expand your wings internationally. And so, what would you say are the most enjoyable job that you've had in data,
Mm.
most and the most
Uh,
meaningful role you've had?
oh my goodness. Yeah. So such a big question, because I think there's a lot of kind of things you can do kind of out there. You work in finance and utilities and all sorts. I think, but for me, I would say that it's not just about industry. I think it's great to have things that you do that you have tangible benefits and tangible returns. Like
Right.
you grow the business, you grow revenue, you save money, there's operational cost reductions, or you avoid risk, right? So it's three kind of key things from a financial standpoint you can do. But I think for me, perhaps the most impactful ones would be things that are in some way or other connected to the ultimate prize in some ways, which I think, most would agree is life in itself. It's either health, something that actually is, either saving life,
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
reducing risks for people, or it's giving people a helping hand when things are difficult. And there's lots of different ways you can get hold of, and think of those kinds of jobs. But if you think about things, for instance, most of them think about insurance as one of those kinds of things. But it's when there's a difficulty, it's kind of out there to support you. Say you had an accident, or you had a flooding in your house, or whatever else. Or perhaps more tangible for people would be working in healthcare itself. I think in the pre-chat we talked about, I
Yeah.
mentioned, me being on the board, say, for like HDR UK, which Health Data Research UK, significant player during COVID, as an example.
Right.
So a lot of people don't realize this, but data was so essential for the response to COVID, both in
Yeah.
terms of the drug side, in actually very quickly getting vaccines at record. I mean, that's probably the quickest vaccine production ever
Ever.
known to man,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Incredible.
And by miles, right? We're talking a scale of
10 years or so, wasn't it?
15x. Yeah, yeah,
Accelerated.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
And all that's underpinned by data, but also all of the responses as well in terms of, and a lot of that data was, supported and underpinned by HDR UK as an
yeah,
example. They're
HDR UK. So
quite
yeah, you
central.
mentioned it earlier. So for individuals listening and watching this, so it's a Health Data Research UK, isn't it? Health Data Research UK,
Correct.
government
Correct.
body, and you were involved in there. So I didn't know you were involved in there at that time during the COVID period.
Yeah, I was. I was very fortunate to be reached out to and asked to come and sit as a non-exec on the board. They're not actually a government organization. They're non-governmental, but they are an institution that do get funding from governmental, sources, if you like, but also non-governmental. For instance, the
Right.
Bill Gates Foundation was one of the funders for them.
Okay.
And yeah, but they in fact, I suppose you can think of them as an NGO, but interacting with both the public sector, but also the commercial sector as well.
Gotcha. Fantastic. Super. So that's obviously without a doubt enjoyable, but also impactful work that you've done. That I'm thinking, that you'll be greatly proud of and deservedly so. Absolutely fantastic. Okay, just kind of moving on. So I'm obviously conscious of your valuable time. So that was a meaningful and enjoyable role for you. But you've also published two successful books, Making Data Work, and Value-Driven Data. So where did the motivation, or what inspired you to become an author as well?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. The first thing is I never ever thought I would be able to be an author. I've tried to do a number of things. And authoring was one that I thought was quite distant.
Sorry, the what?
I
Sorry,
think
what was distant? The
uh,
what? Sorry,
yeah, to authoring and actually writing a book.
authoring. Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought was quite distant, distant ambition that was probably going to remain in dreamland. And it wasn't the easiest thing in the world to do. I'll be honest. And the first thing is I'm not, I don't know what people out there might think, but I'm naturally quite shy and not a very public, kind of naturally public facing figure. But I've been quite fortunate to be able to address that over time. And one of the ways I did that was actually by going out there and putting myself out, publishing little articles, and then moving on from that to, kind of publishing, videos and things like that. And so it was a progression from that. And I was also quite fortunate that my wife decided that she was, from one of my birthday presents, she was going to put me out, and I went out to this masterclass. It was a full day kind of workshop thing
Right.
where you learned to write a book kind of thing,
Wow.
Yeah, so I went out there and it was really, really fascinating because what the approach there was very hands-on. It was like, let's start doing it right now. So the first exercise in the day it wasn't to teach you anything, it was actually for you to start writing that book right there.
Wow.
So by the time we finished the day, for most people that outlined a book of some description and they had sort of written parts of the first chapter always. So you're kind of feeling like, oh, okay, I've kind of started now at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all I need to do is to continue, which is the big friction kind of out the window, right? I never published that book that I started writing, but it inspired me to think, if I could do that, I could,
Progress further.
outline something and actually do something that,
Yeah. Yeah.
spend a bit
So
of time thinking.
was that book about data that you started to write on that course, or was it something different? No, it
No, it was
wasn't.
actually it's a funny one actually because that course was actually how to write a memoir. So it wasn't
Oh,
really how to write a professional kind of book,
right.
but so I started out writing that memoir in that class, but I never published it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
so
Exactly.
so that's on a drive somewhere. Yeah.
Excellent. But that kind of gave you the determination, the interest, and piqued your interest. But you know what? I could probably do this. So
Yeah.
fantastic. So then
Indeed.
fast forward like 2 years, and then you published the first book, which is amazing. Went down really, really well. So the first one was obviously Making Data Work. Is that right?
That's right. That was the first one. Yeah.
Okay. And then subsequently, you've now authored and published Value-Driven Data. I mean, I
That's right.
see them popping up on LinkedIn, obviously on Amazon as well. They've been really, really well received? Because I know there's individuals in the industry that speak about you and what you've done, publishing them. So fantastic, fantastic. So has that helped elevate you as well and kind of given you more, open more doors? Do you think? Is that? Do you believe?
I think so. I think that it's very difficult to know what is elevating. I'm not necessarily going out there for the purpose of elevating, to be
No.
honest. And it's very difficult. I think, when you look at, and a lot of people talk about personal branding and things like this, I can't really, I mean, I didn't have a grand plan, to be entirely honest. So I think now we can talk about, oh, what were the good things and what were the things that helped you. But I think initially what I started off doing was I had a passion to kind of share knowledge, and
Yeah.
I was very keen to do that. I remember my first ever blog post. It was off the back of going out. I went to an AWS sort of bit, I think it was a training thing, and I was explaining to the guys what we had done in one of my projects, and they were just fascinated by it, and I'm like, oh my God, I didn't even know that people were using the platform in that way. So they really pushed me to say, look, why don't you just put something out there for people to sort of learn from this? And that's how I wrote my first blog
Right.
posts, very, very reluctantly. And it's,
How long ago was that? How long ago was that? Is that like
uh,
about 15 years ago? Right?
yeah, not less than 10. I would say probably 15 years ago. It was my first sort of LinkedIn blog post. And I was kind of the only one for a while after I managed to write and rewrite and write and rewrite it and you know
Yeah, I hear you.
procrastinate and then think, oh my God, should I repost this? Should I hit that button?
Yeah,
At some point just hit it and just,
that was it. I know. Yeah, definitely.
waited for it to explode. And it didn't explode. Instead, it was very well received and I was pleased about the kind of response. And then
Fantastic.
yeah, so went on from there. Yeah.
Super. Well done. Well done. That's great. I think everyone's kind of got that, get the heebie-jeebies, and about publishing stuff, doing videos, and the imposter syndrome kind of kicks in, especially when it's something such as important professionally as well,
Yeah.
about your knowledge and perception, vision. It can definitely be a daunting thing to hit that send button, and because once it's
Yeah,
published, it's out there, isn't it? Do you know what I mean? So fantastic, brilliant.
indeed.
So,
Yeah.
so over the last 2 years, especially 2023, AI just kind of like slapped everyone around the face. Over the last 12, 15 months, it's been crazy. You remember the beginning of 2023, chat GPT, etc. So, I mean, how does that make you feel in terms of everyone kind of waking up to data? And secondly, it's a bit of a double-loaded question. What are your predictions for 2024?
Mm. So look, I'd say starting with the ChatGPT and how it's making me feel and the sort of buzz around that. I think that's it's in some ways it's kind of double-edged as well, right? Because there's a huge amount, and clearly there's excitement, there's clearly, avenues to make value and of all kinds, right? Of all kinds, more than a lot of people actually realize, right? There's a huge amount there. But let's be honest, there's also the kind of negatives, right? In some ways, people are concerned it's going to, kill some jobs. Is it going to, create, risks, open us up to lots of different types of risks, everything from social engineering to cyber and to all sorts of things, right?
Mm,
I mean, it's huge, huge kind of negatives, right? So that's how it kind of makes me feel. But I think that, we can't, it's like with anything else, or any kind of tool. I mean, obviously, there's AI before Gen AI, right?
mm.
It's based on AI, and so these things had existed anyway in some ways.
Yeah,
The same excitement and risk, I think, it's just a buzz. It's gone up a number of levels. Jobs are already being lost. Jobs are already being replaced, but also opportunities are already being developed and enhanced, right? So it's kind of almost that sort of thing where which way do you want to look? And are you going to sit back and wait for the negatives to land and hit you, or are you going to look at the other side and say, "Look, here are some opportunities here.
I need to
Let's
adapt and mold yourself.
let's grab it." Right,
Yeah,
and there's lots of statistics out there that talk about how many jobs are to be created. There's also ones that talk about jobs to be lost. Right.
sure.
So on what side do you want to land? Do you want to land on the side of the jobs being created, or be one of the statistics for those who've lost. So
Yeah, yeah, you
I just
got
think
to
I
roll
just
with
think
it.
I just think so. Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I mean, perhaps the big question is how. Clearly this is a new thing, and I've been talking about this for many years. That the biggest skill anyone can have is really just that, wanting to continuously learn, right? And I've been talking about this in education. I've gone to schools, and places to talk about this, that we need actually to start learning how to learn, as opposed to thinking, right, I've done my education now and that's it, or I've got this job and that's it. The one thing I've been very fortunate about is I've never really felt like I know it. I've always felt like, what's the next thing to learn, right?
Right, yeah, self-improvement
I've kind
all the time.
yeah, I've always had that, and again, maybe I've just unfortunate to have had that bug in me, I've always kind of felt like, do I need to learn something else? Do I need to learn on the job? Do I need to read up on X, Y, Z? Reading widely, not sitting and only reading technical books as an example. Read
Yeah,
widely, read about psychology, read about history, and bring all that to bear. And I think fortunate as well that I've kind of been out in kind of variety of industries. But that was fortunate. That was intentional. I didn't, you know, say to people, speaking to a recruiter, for instance, oh no, I only want to be in industry X. It's very
right.
open to learn. It's a learn opportunity as well.
Gotcha,
Being out
gotcha.
there in places that are not your comfort
Yeah,
zone
yeah. So,
in some ways,
sort of
right?
becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable, as it were. I know it's a bit of a cliche now, but I mean, but it's true, isn't
Yeah,
it? True.
yeah,
It really, really is
yeah.
true.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Fantastic.
Predictions you asked.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I was going to get to that
You
now.
wanted
So,
you, you
so
wanted
what do you,
predictions.
what do you see on the horizon,
Oh my
from
God,
your
that's
lens?
yeah. I don't know. Look, it's so hard because before this, I mean, to be honest, I mean, people would talk about things like, AGI, or like general intelligence and things like that. And people would talk about things like, the kind of gadgets we might find, flying. Of course, we were
Yeah,
talking about
flying
driverless
cars,
cars,
something
so
like that.
flying cars maybe. But look, I think the thing that I predict is that you know, we're going to see, to my mind, we're going to see some big surprises. There are going to be some big surprises. My biggest problem is what dangers, sort of are they kind of lurking, and I'm concerned about that. I'm,
Okay.
I'm concerned about the fact that, we're in a situation where we can't control where knowledge, it's very unlike, say, the nuclear age, where, you knew what the weapons were, you knew people were producing stuff and whatever else. But we're now actually in the knowledge age, right? Which is very difficult to control where
Mm.
knowledge goes and where things can be produced, right? And
Regulation,
so,
perhaps, or things like that. Do you think that's kind of
right.
playing a part in?
Well, this is part of the problem because if you can't see it, it's very difficult to regulate it, right?
Mm.
And doing global regulation, I'm talking across the globe now, not not
Yeah,
not not like in the UK or wherever else, is
impossible, right?
hard. It's very hard, especially, given that it's knowledge we're talking about as opposed to physical goods,
Yeah, exactly.
of physical weapons and things. So I think that's the biggest concern I have. I really do foresee huge opportunities, really, really like innovative things out there. Maybe at a point we wouldn't be, we would have phones anymore. Perhaps, there's this thing already out there where people are mastering things into fingers and into chips into all sorts of different places. They can just talk to stuff. But it kind of, you can think about it like it's almost enabled now with likes of generative AI. The
If you
the
think about something,
interface
you can make
doesn't
it.
have to be physical. Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, if your interface was, if your method of interacting was voice, then you probably don't need a screen, right? Because you can speak to your finger, speak to your hands, or speak to something, right? And so I think we're in that sort of age of radical innovation now, that devices are going to morph into all sorts of different things, and perhaps a lot of them potentially even disappear.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Without that, it's definitely interesting times. Crazy. My father and my mum, they both live overseas, and so speak sharing things with them because they're like 86 and 87, and they just can't believe what's going on. They just cannot believe it, and it's just like they're seeing things that they just dreamed about, or they would just laugh about when they were growing up. And I just can't believe it. They're just absolutely every day when I speak to them, like every week, and it's always a talking point. We heard about this because they're just intrigued by it. So it's like, oh my god, I can't
Mm.
believe this is happening. So yeah, it's mad. It is absolutely insane, but really really interesting times. Really really interesting times indeed. So okay, so black guy. I'm a black guy. The BDPN, we are black data professionals, assisting individuals, guiding their careers, celebrating wins, providing coaching, and all the rest of it. And but because we're living life and our careers through as being black individuals. So what have you experienced as a black individual that you wouldn't experience if you were a white person? Has there been any sort of negativity that you've experienced that you want to share? Or do you feel as though that mindset that you've had to adopt a certain mindset that's allowed you to navigate and to absorb any knocks, or maybe you've not experienced many knocks because of
Mm.
your color of your skin? What are your thoughts on that?
Look, this is, it's super touchy, complex area, right?
Yeah,
And one of the biggest challenges that we have, first of all, I'll answer the question directly. Have I had any knocks? I have had clearly lots of knocks, but I've had lots of successes as well, right? And
yeah,
that's out there to be seen. And interestingly, it's so much easier to see the successes than it is to see clearly the knocks, right?
yeah,
And
absolutely.
because we're not advertising sufficiently, we need a LinkedIn for knocks, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good idea. Do that.
Yeah,
Who's got the
that
biggest
that might be
knocks?
a thing. Who knows? But listen, uh, the biggest difficulty we have, and we do talk about this in one direction, perhaps not in both, is that it's very difficult to really understand things without having the lived experience, right? But when we say this from a black perspective, and we're talking about this to people who are not black, it's easy to say that because you're kind of feeling like on the receiving end, but it's almost equally difficult from the other perspective because we've never been white, we've never been not black. So how can we fully appreciate whether non-black people get knocks and how many they get, or what their perspective is on life in general? It's very hard, and I think that we get into a world that it's kind of he said she said, and it's almost like a lose-lose situation. I tell you, I've been in a lot of situations with in DNI councils. I've been members of councils. I've tried
Mhm.
to to contribute to that, and it's been so insightful because you're sitting with people of very, very diverse backgrounds, including white and non-black people so it was a nice mix. And it's really interesting. I was very fortunate to be in one where at the start it was very much everyone, being cagey, not wanting to just saying the things everyone wanted to hear. But we got to a point where we opened things up and really wanted to dig deep into people's almost consciousness in some ways. It
Yeah,
was a very it was an incredible experience. And one of the things that came out of it was some of the kind of fears and concerns of non-black people, right? It's almost in that sort of situation where we potentially can create a wrong by trying to fix it right. you know,
what like
um,
so trying to investigate it to find a solution
hmm.
causes chaos that kind of like makes more of a division between the blacks
Yeah,
and white.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I'll give you a tangible example. So I was invited to join a DEI panel in a kind of conference, right? You can imagine, a typical DEI panel. You can probably, imagine the constitution of it. So there was probably a couple of people from a sort of Asian background. There was myself, and there was a couple of ladies and a couple of kind of guys and whatever else. But the one thing that was certainly absent from the panelists was there was no white people on it, right? And we're talking about
Hmm.
diversity and inclusion here, right? And then the only person who was white was the moderator.
Right. What country
And
was it in?
so
What country? Was it in the
it,
UK
it was
or?
it was it was in the UK. It was in the UK, and I tell you, it's fascinating, and that's not even the end of the story. It was fascinating that when we started out the panel, the first thing that the moderator said was pretty much along the lines of apologizing for being even on that panel, for being a moderator to a DE&I panel. To which I then straight away went straight at him and said, "Look, how can we be having this conversation? Like, look, we're talking inclusion, and then you're talking starting this conversation with exclusion, right? We should all be having this conversation together, right? We should,
Yeah,
we should
definitely.
be trying to flatten things out." And so it's fascinating. And lots of people that I talk to, almost feel like that, like what this person was saying, almost feel that they need to apologize for having the conversation in the first place, rather than actually us all having that conversation.
Mm.
And perhaps that's partly to do with us, partly to do with the way the approach that people take to the conversation,
Yeah,
that people feel apprehensive
could
about
be.
having
Yeah.
it.
I
I don't
don't think
know.
people know what
I
to
really
do.
don't know.
I don't think, yeah, without a doubt, I don't think people know what to do. White people know
Mm,
what to do, especially they feel as though, well, what can I say? Should I be there? And I think everyone's just got to be make them feel comfortable because they're going into a situation where it's typically if it's like a blacks and Asians there, they're going to be the outsider. And so I think it's up to us to kind of say, okay, fine, look, come into this conversation, come into this debate, this discussion, this panel, and make it comfortable for them to kind of to air their opinions. Do you know what I mean? Or
mm,
and but yeah, it is a difficult one. But getting back to the original question? So do you feel
mm.
as though that is your color has hindered you in terms of maybe job interview, or has your color hindered you in terms of promotion? Um, and have you experienced anything like that to those sort of to that level? Would you say?
Look, it's very difficult to say definitively, right?
Yeah,
Unless
yeah, you
you
don't know for sure,
clearly
but you
have that
felt,
data. But I think I'll be surprised if he hasn't. I'll
yeah.
be surprised if he hasn't. And the reason I'll be surprised if he hasn't is that as humans, right? We do have this inherent thing, don't we, of unconscious biases, right? It may not even be intentional. I mean, I've had situations where there was intentional, and a bias, where
Mm.
someone would say to me, because don't forget, I've been hired, but I've also hired as well, right? So I've had kind of both experiences, and so it's it's very interesting. Sometimes that some people would literally be very, very vocal and clear about their biases, and not even unconscious. Literally, I want that person because of X, right? But a lot
Mm.
of times it's unconscious. But I have to tell you something that you know
Please.
that this kinds of biases and this kinds of, let's call them discrimination of all kinds, you know, they do work both ways at times. And I have had situations where,
Mm.
I've had I at least suspected that I had opportunities because of my color, as opposed to being in spite of, right? And so, you know,
Mm.
it kind of works both ways. And I don't know if it cancels out because I don't have all the data
Sure.
that actually says this I got because and this I didn't get because, right? But I do know that there are those kinds of situations that can actually be, if you like, positive discrimination. And
Yeah.
some people, when they find out about that, there's a lot of movements. I know that people who detest that,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
idea that
I
it can
know
be
that was,
positively
yeah, yeah. No,
right.
I'm with you on that. Definitely with that. I spoke to somebody else a little while ago, like last year, and who experienced the same thing. They've been put into a position because of their color, quite a senior role as well. And one of his buddies, who's a white guy, said to him, "You got that because you were black."
Yeah,
And he said, because all the blacks were rising through the business. He said, no, not at all. So they got the organization chart out, and they could see that the majority of individuals who were getting promotions the majority were still white. So the individual retracted that statement that he mentioned to the black guy. But yeah, but he deservedly got that position, but but it's debatable whether it was because of his color. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah.
I hear that.
It's difficult to tell, and
Mm.
sometimes sometimes it's easier to, I suppose, extrapolate or to to deduce that. But I think the one thing that I would say And I think it's probably one of the things, I mean, there's a couple of things that I'd say about this that I have done for myself, right? So one of them is that I try not to focus too much. It's hard not to think about it at all, but I try not to focus too much on things that I cannot control, right?
Mm,
And really, it's almost like I think there's a big thing about this circles of concern and circles of control. I think we've got to think in to some degree in this way, in that there's certain things we can't control. The fact there's discrimination out there, positive, negative, there's biases that are sometimes punished, sometimes not. But the thing is, there's things that we can control, right? The things we can control, we can continue to learn and to have, a very kind of continuous learning mindset. We can continue to, find and build resilience. Look, the market in the UK, as an example, we know is hard, but I don't think it's hard only for one sector of the market. It could be, sort of skewed towards one. But I think individuals in general, as people who are black and people who are white who are out of work, as an example,
mm,
in the UK, right? So so I think we need to step a little bit away from that. But the other thing I say is also, really just having that sort of, you know, I wouldn't call it resilience to some degree, and just knowing that sometimes you see successes out there, but actually you don't know whether, you see a big announcement, oh, someone's become a chief data officer or wherever else. Was he just headhunted, or was it after applying 1,000 times?
mm.
You don't know, right?
No.
But I can tell you that a lot of people who are successful try and try again. They
Yeah,
just
I
don't
think
give up.
we touched on it earlier, didn't we, before we recorded that, in terms of I know, I mean, recruitment have been for like 15 years plus now, and individuals who are able to take the knocks and carry on um, can exceed. But I've also spoken to candidates who have said to me on multiple occasions, I've spoken about this before actually, where I've contacted a black candidate about a vacancy, and he or she on multiple times has said to me, Ian, do you know what? I'm just going to write it out here. I'm just going to sit here and write it out for another 4 or 5 years or whatever, because they're seeing individuals just surpass them, and they're just exhausted for going for interview after interview after interview after interview and not getting that role. And then you speak to individuals who just stick with it, and they eventually get that role, whether it's internally or externally. Typically, when I'm involved, it's an external role. Um, and but yeah, so seeing it from both sides of the fence, individuals who can absorb those blows, and they've documented it and seen they've documented the experience, the journey they went through, and it's just like, wow, I can't believe you've been through that. And some individuals can keep going, and they can, so I think we touched on it before, is having that mindset of knowing it's going to be a bumpy road. It may not be a bumpy road, but knowing that it may be, and having that grit and determination and support around you to allow you to achieve that. That's something that I'm a big advocate of, is just trying to get into that mindset of, look, I know it may be bumpy, but I need to get my head in gear here, and because I will get there. And that's what I want to instill in the members, that yeah, recognize it's going to be a bumpy road out there, but how can we help you find that mindset to allow you to achieve your goals? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So you
Yeah,
know
but it's hard. Listen,
mm,
let's face it. It's hard. We're human beings. It's not easy to take a knock. It's not easy, to take a rejection. It's not easy to see. You applied for 10 jobs. You get almost no responses,
mm,
or you get
ghosted.
one, or you get ghosted, or I mean, these things happen. And it's not an easy thing for people. I think one of the things that can help is having that community, like you say, like the things that you're doing as an example, but also having having a buddy, or a mentor,
Mm,
or a coach, or whatever it is you can find to just give you a sounding board, some reassurance, you know. And I have to say something else which I hadn't mentioned is, you know, I when I say be resilient, I don't mean necessarily trying and doing the same thing over and over and over. I think it's also learning from what might be
yes,
failures, and
yeah,
and and,
tweaking
adapt and
things.
adapting,
Yeah,
adapting. is this something do I need to position myself in a slightly different way? It doesn't have to be radical, but each
Mm.
time, it's almost like, I remember in my early career, people talk about things like interview experience. Now, interview experience is not just about going to successive interviews, it's about going to interview number one and learning something from it to take into interview number two,
Mm.
and so on, right? And so by the time you're looking at interview number 10, you're not the same person. You actually
Yeah,
have grown and learned
polished, more polished.
from, yeah, absolutely. So part of the resilience is also the continuous learning that goes
Journey that, yeah,
alongside it.
definitely,
Yeah,
without
I
doubt,
think this is really
100%.
important. Yeah.
Superb, fantastic. No, it's really, really good answer. Really good, really good comment to make. It's true. So always learn from each, each interview, each journey, each meeting, each job, um, to kind of fine tune becoming a better version of yourself, essentially. Fantastic.
Exactly.
So what's your legacy going to be, man? I mean, wow, you keep climbing these different levels of achievement and success. So that it's all clear for us all to see. So what's your legacy going to be?
I don't know. It's a difficult one, and that's part of my, I suppose my shortcomings is I don't have that ultimate goal. But I think if there was one, it'll have to be around people, and firstly, I suppose selfishly, I'll talk about my family. I've got two boys and a lovely wife, and it's really about putting something out there. For instance, I dedicated my first book, for instance, to my kids, to my wife, my nieces and nephews. Because I think they're the future. They're the ones who, in some ways, I suppose would benefit, hopefully, in some ways, by aspiring to do better than parents and uncles and aunties have done. So I think that's a big one. But I think if you like, perhaps it's too bold to say, but I think if I'm able to make a bit of an impact, on the world, whether that's specifically in the kind of solutions and things are put out there that either save lives or avoid, health issues or whatever
Yeah.
else, you know, that would be great. And even if not directly, then perhaps indirectly by putting knowledge out there, putting things out there, supporting others who then go on to do things like that.
Yeah.
I'll be, I think I've done
I
done a
love
great,
that. I love that.
good
I love
job.
that. You can tell you want to share stuff. You want to share knowledge. You want to share, look, I know this works. I know this is good. You want to, I love that about what you do. It's about sharing knowledge and findings and giving people, sharing that knowledge, which is, yeah, it's essentially, it's essentially what part of your DNA, which is fantastic. Okay, now I get that. I know where you're coming from. I know where you're coming from. I know I'm similar. I'm similar in that way a little bit as well. Okay, cool. So look, again, conscious of time. So how do you want to wrap this up in terms of, is there anything that you want to share about, based on who we've got as an audience? We've got black data professionals, and with what you've achieved in the world of data and analytics. Is there anything you want to kind of share before we kind of like sign off for this part one? I'm coming back for part two, man. Don't worry
Listen,
about
listen,
that.
listen. I just want to talk directly to people kind of out there, and I know that times can be hard, even for those who have jobs, right? And like you say, you look at things that are kind of going on around you, and it's very easy to to be sort of down, feel down about things, right? And feel like hard done by based on your background, your complexion, your color, or your race. I would say, really, it, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be that way. I know it's hard. There are things that you can do. You can keep being out there, put yourself out there, learn. But also, one thing I would say, you know, look out and don't be on your own, right? Join a community, follow people, go onto LinkedIn, follow people, but don't only follow people that are like me, of course follow me and interact with me and reach out, be bold, but also follow people who you may not agree with, people who may be a little bit different from you, and look at things from
Mm,
their perspective as well, right?
interesting one. Yeah.
There's things to learn. There's things to learn from all sorts of different perspectives, and it only makes you richer, better, more knowledgeable, and just give you that breath. So I would say, don't sit out there on your own. Go out there, be proactive. Gain knowledge from people. I follow lots and lots of people myself to learn.
Me too.
But also I would say, kind of go outside of your kind of comfort zone. You might end up, if not, in a bit of an echo chamber. You want that community, but you also want to step outside of it. So that's what I would say. I'd say please do that. I'd encourage you to do that. And there's lots of opportunities out there. Let's be positive about this. There's a huge, huge, huge thing,
Especially now,
wave
what's
going on right now, right?
Yeah, definitely, without a doubt. I mean, the data's got like, what can everyone hit everyone around the face with a wet fish? It's like, oh my gosh, wow. So massive, massive surgence in terms of the world of data. Fantastic, super stuff. Edosa, I want to say thank you so much. I mean, as I said 3 or 4 minutes ago, this is part one. I mean, you got so much value to share and to tap into. So yeah, without a doubt, I'll be coming back later on this year for part two. So I want to take this opportunity to say thank you very much. Superb.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. Thank you very much for what you're doing. Keep doing it. And I'll be very happy to have conversations about helping in any sort of shape or form I can.
Superb. Well, I welcome you with open arms, man. With open arms. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Most